Hi, I'm Steve Farrell, the Worldwide Executive Director for Humanities team, and welcome to this Spiritual Activism panel with Neale Donald Walsch, Craig Hamilton, James Twyman, and Steve Behrman. Spiritual activism is the coming together of spirituality and activism. It's not about religion. It's not about any form of dogma. It is activism that comes from the heart, not just the head. Activism that is compassionate, positive, kind, and transformative. Being a spiritual activist means taking our part in creating change with a spirit of positivity, compassion, love, and a balance of interdependence and self-determination. Nothing could be more inspiring and more rewarding than being the change we want to see in the world, within and without. That's what this panel is about. I'm going to introduce you to the panel now. I'll introduce panel members one at a time, and then we'll go right to questions and panel discussion. Neale Donald Walsch is a modern-day spiritual messenger whose words continue to touch the world in profound ways. Neale has written 29 books on spirituality and its practical application in everyday life. Conversations with God has redefined God and shifted spiritual paradigms around the globe. The Conversations with God series of books has been translated into 37 languages, touching billions and inspiring important changes in their day-to-day lives. Welcome to Global Oneness Day, Neale.
Thank you. It's lovely to be here.
Craig Hamilton is a pioneer in the emerging field of evolutionary spirituality and a leading voice in the movement for conscious evolution. Craig is the guiding force behind Integral Enlightenment, offering spiritual guidance and teachings to a growing international community spanning 50 countries around the world. Craig founded the Academy for Evolutionaries, offering training that are in alignment with understanding of the human condition. He is currently working to articulate an integral enlightenment, which illuminates the vital relationship between individual transformation and collective evolution. Welcome to Global Oneness Day, Craig.
Thank you, Steve, and hi, everybody. Great to be here with you.
Great to have you with us. Steve Behrman is an internationally known author, humorist, and workshop leader. For the past 23 years, he has written and performed as Swami Beyondananda, the Cosmic Comic. Steve co-founded Pathways Magazine, one of the first publications bringing together holistic health, personal growth, spirituality, and politics. His latest book, written with cellular biologist Bruce Lipton, is Spontaneous Evolution. Steve is active in transpartisan politics and the practical application of spontaneous evolution. Welcome to Global Oneness Day, Steve.
Well, thank you for having me. It's great to be with you.
Great to have you. And last, definitely not least, James Twyman is the best-selling author of 15 books, musician, singer, and songwriter, and known around the globe as the Peace Troubadour. James puts peace prayers from the 12 major religions to music and began traveling the world, performing concerts to groups of thousands to spread his message of peace. James is an award-winning film producer and director who also founded the Beloved Community, a network of spiritual peace ministers around the world. Welcome to Global Oneness Day, James.
Thank you, Steve. It is great to be here.
Okay, awesome. Well, it's great to be here together with you all. Thanks again, Neale, Craig, James, and Steve. We've all really been looking forward to this panel, and we've only got an hour, so let's just jump right in here and get started. And Neale, if I may, let me just bring the first question to you. In coming years, what are things people can do as spiritual activists if they have not written a top book and are not a leader in a church?
Well, it's a very big challenge for all of us, whether we've done those things or not. But my answer to your question, Steve, would be that what all of us can do is to endeavor, to the best of our ability, to integrate what we have come to understand and to know. I think that many more people are awake, to use a popular term these days. Many more people are conscious and awake to what's happening and to who they are, for that matter, than we might imagine. I think there's a very large number of people. Barbara Marx Hubbard likes to call them the cultural creatives. Whatever name you give them, they number in the millions, not in the hundreds of thousands, around the world, who are now really fully awakened to their true identity and what's going on the planet as well. But the problem is, or the challenge is, not merely to be awake to the fact, but to be able to model and to integrate that which we are awakened to integrate that in our everyday minute-to-minute, hour-to-hour behaviors, and to model those behaviors for the purpose of not only our individual evolution, but the purpose of awakening the species, to allow all those whose lives we touch to become awakened to the degree that they still need to themselves, thus to create a global experience, not just an individual experience, but all global experiences of whatever kind were inevitably started by one or two people. It's just how it always has been and how it always will be. So I think the big challenge, Steve, as I see it, is for us to decide to be that one or two people who are going to step forward and do the best we can in modeling the behaviors or being the change, if you please, that we wish to see in the world. Not an easy task. I've found that to be not an easy task in my life. It's easier to speak it than to do it. In my experience, I don't want to speak for anybody else on this panel, but it's been my experience. And if I have only one discouragement in my life, my discouragement is that my actions follow so far behind my words. However, at least I know where I'm going. Whereas 20 years ago, I promise you, I had no idea where I was going or what was going on.
Well, you're being very humble, Neil, and
no, I'm being very accurate.
And you speak to people from where they sit too, huh? Because how many people would say, of our listeners, how many would say, "Oh, I walk on water. I don't make any mistakes." So thank you. What a great way to start this program. And Steve, let me come over to you, if I may, in your own words. What is spiritual activism, and what does it mean to be a spiritual activist?
Well, I think first of all, it means to be connected, and as Neil had suggested, primarily it begins with who we are individually as we awaken, and as we connect with other people, and also we're a medium, we're a conduit, we're communicators. And I was reminded of this. We just did a show in a very small town, and in this very small town, we met people that we totally loved, who came from completely opposite and three different points of view, that completely opposite political points of view. And so if you stay in the domain of the head, then you're going to get involved with a lot of arguments and so on. What we did with all of these people is we connected at the heart. And, we decided to meet on the other side of this election, at the end of the election period. And we stay in the heart throughout that entire time. And what happens when we think about activism, we think about the things that we want to change, we think about the things that there is a discrepancy between the way things are and the way we know that they can be. And that's why, fortunately, I've practiced the art of cosmic comedy for all of these years, because in the domain of humor, you could stay in the heart, you can point out the contradictions, you can allow the contradictions to play themselves out, and you laugh about the dueling dualities, and if it's done right, the laughter puts you in the central focus of the heart, so that no matter what people believe, the dueling dualities in the head that keep us separate, we leave the static of the head for the ecstatic of the heart. And as long as we're connected at the heart, then it makes it possible for us to tolerate these differences in beliefs when generally just about every one of us want the same things.
Yeah, beautiful. Wow. Well, you just took us down into this whole discussion around finding this place of connection from our heart. So let's go a little deeper into that one. And James, if I could, maybe direct this question at you. What are some of the ways that a person can listen to their heart and not just be in their head?
Well, first of all, there was something that Steve just said that I loved, so I immediately wrote it down. And when he referred to the moving from the static of the mind to the ecstatic of the heart, I love that, Steve. That is such a great little saying. And I think that really is the key. Sometimes I call that the 12-inch journey. It's really the only journey that's important. And though it's going to be different for each one of us, it's going to be the same, because it's the journey from the mind to the heart. And you said it at the very beginning of this call that This is a call about spiritual activism. And yet it's really about the heart. It's about having an active heart. Activism means to be in action, for there to be extension of the heart. And when you were speaking to Neil a moment ago, asking how anyone can do this, the truth is we so often get hung up on ideas like, well, it's better to be famous in doing this in big ways than it is to be doing it in small ways. And I don't really believe that's true. I think it's in the small, ordinary moments, sharing our heart, extending the truth of who we are, that this really takes root, not only within us, but within the world itself. It could be as ordinary as a smile. It can be as ordinary as a kind word. So it doesn't matter if you've written books or you lead a church. I mean, those things are nice, but one is not more important than the other, because if we're not doing the small things, if we're not extending our love and our heart in small, seemingly ordinary ways, then nothing is really happening. You know, Charles Dickens once said that it was the best of times, it was the worst of times. And yet, you know, that's kind of where we find ourselves right now. There seems to be so much division, but as more and more of us come to that awakened heart, share from that space in ordinary ways, then we realize that you know, that darkness that we seem to be is really just a precursor to a brilliant light that is now coming into the world, that's emanating through each one of us making the decision to move from the static of the mind into the ecstatic of the heart. So thank you, Steve Behrman, for that beautiful saying.
You're welcome.
Yeah. Yeah, wonderful. Moving from the static of the mind to the ecstatic of the heart. So that's one for the refrigerator, isn't it?
Sure.
Calling that out here, James. And also, I love, you know, you're bringing this down to, you know, what, of course, Global Oneness Day is about is what can all of us, what can ordinary people do? So as ordinary as a smile, as ordinary as a kind word. It's about small things. It doesn't have to be about big things. And that was Mother Teresa's work, too, wasn't it? Calling that out.
And you know what? James does that every time he picks up his guitar. You asked him, you know, to give you some examples of things we could do. Well, he does it every day of his life, sometimes in private, sometimes with 2 people in the room. I've seen him do it with, you know, nobody there but 1 or 2 friends, and sometimes with 500 people or more in an audience. But every time he picks up his guitar, he puts into music. Oh, man, music hath charms to soothe the savage breast. And James understands that. Steve does it with humor. He just, in exactly the same way. So talk about using tools. If we can be lighthearted enough with ourselves to use humor and to sing a song, you know, in the shower in the morning when you get up, and down the road when you're driving to work, and even for that matter, in front of somebody else, just sing a song of love to another person. What wonderful ways, my goodness, and 2 of these guys are doing it every day of their life.
Yeah, beautiful, Neil. It doesn't have to be heavy, does it? And it can be light and it can be fun, and sometimes it's most effective that way. So, yeah, thank you for that. Let me bring Craig in here, Craig Hamilton. And, of course, in today's society with so much going on nationally and internationally, how important is spiritual activism for the times that we're living in?
How important is spiritual activism? You know, it's interesting to be in a conversation where we're putting these 2 words together, spiritual and activism. I think it often, you know, we think of spiritual as inner and activism as outer. And so the conversation becomes, how do we bring our kind of inner wisdom, our inner development, our inner inspiration out into the world to try to change what's happening out in the world. I want to, so my simple answer is it's really important, but let me explain what I mean by it. So we've been talking about this in a lot of different ways already, which is great to feel how much richness and breadth and depth we've already gone into. I want to speak about another piece of this, which is, because I think often this inner-outer sort of dialectic becomes the theme of spiritual activism. And yet I know whenever I think about spiritual activism, my attention goes first and foremost to one place, and it's resonant with what Neil was invoking at the beginning, and that is each of us probably listening to this call is probably interested in spirituality and oneness. That's why we're tuning into this. So let's say we're all spiritually inclined people. I would guess it's true that all of us have a sense of an extraordinary possibility for human life, that we each have tasted in our own ways this potential for for being a completely different kind of human, but more significantly for experiencing a different kind of world. Spiritual people alive today, we have a sense of some possibility for heaven on earth. Now, what do I mean by heaven on earth? I mean, and it's always an interesting question to ask people. What's your vision of heaven on earth? People get very inspired and will start sharing with you what it is. But when I'm talking about heaven on earth, I'm talking about what happens between people when we're able to come together beyond ego. And by beyond ego, I'll give that a simple definition. What I mean by coming together beyond ego means we're able to come together where our fundamental motivation, where what's fundamentally moving us is no longer self-interest. It's no longer serving my agenda and my story. It's we're able to live together and come together in a mutual passion for the greater good, in, again, whatever ways we might all define that. So we have this sense, and to me, one of the most profound kinds of activism that we can all do, you were saying, what can the ordinary person do in their ordinary life? Well, this is something every ordinary spiritually motivated person can do. We can aspire to be living in that heaven on earth, to be the person who is aligning with that higher vision, serving that, setting aside our smallness, living from this greater center that we all have a taste of. And in that, we're participating consciously in the evolution of the human race. We're participating in the giving birth to what this can all become. And then, yes, that can manifest in a million different practical ways, but the center of it is spiritual. So I just wanted to bring that piece back in here as well.
Yeah, beautiful, Craig. Boy, that brings back just this whole aspect of being the change we wish to see in the world, both inner and outer, and that is enough. You know, what you're saying is our voices don't even need to do much. Our life becomes a living expression. It's the Gandhi thing of my life is my message.
And obviously it's a tall order, as has been, as Neil said at the beginning, it's a tall order to be a living expression of your highest ideals and your deepest sense of what's possible. So that's like enough for a lifetime in and of itself.
And what I wonder, Craig and the rest of you guys, what I wonder is how do we make, I used the word integration when I first started. How do we integrate all that all of us have just said now into the ordinary moments of life? The reason I bring it up is that I had dinner recently. I just had dinner out with a couple of people, and I have to tell you that I was sitting at dinner trying desperately to do the thing, Craig, that you've just mentioned and that Steve and James have been talking about as well. It was to integrate my sense of who I am, my sense of who they are, my sense of who, what's going on in life, that there's more going on here than meets the eye and all that wonderful stuff, and my sense of oneness. But here was the problem. It was just an ordinary moment in life. I wasn't at a church service. I wasn't at one of James's concerts. I wasn't listening to Stevie Hilarious with his wonderful insights. I was just simply at dinner with 2 or 3 people. And, well, how do I confess this? I was bored to tears. Bored because I knew of something about myself that wasn't being expressed. But more important, I was observing quietly. Does anybody here have any interest at all in what's reading? I mean, we've just been talking for 45 minutes about nothing and about trivial things and about things that totally don't matter and about things that are even almost embarrassing to repeat if you were going to say to somebody else what you talked about at dinner. And I had such a hard time integrating, my sense of who I am and why I'm here on the earth, and that thing that you just mentioned, Craig, about just bringing forward and calling forward that sense of, the possibilities of being human and so forth in a new way, and to bring it to the everyday moments in life, to the checkout line at the supermarket, or to dinner with friends that's going nowhere.
What that brings to mind, Neil, is, and of course I know you so well, but remember when we did the world tour in 2007 and we were at the embassy in Portugal, and that kind of superficial conversation you just want to walk away from. You just don't have any time for.
I think I did, as a matter of fact.
Right. So a piece of it is just that context. But somebody was getting ready to come in, please.
And Neil's asking and kind of presencing the challenge of a moment like that, and what does one do? And maybe part of the answer is calling forth that higher possibility, saying, what are we talking about here? And up-leveling the conversation. I think there's a lot of risk, frankly, in living the kind of life that we're speaking about, because we have to keep taking the risk to break the status quo that we're all in and go somewhere new, stretch toward that potential, and maybe it's going to make people terribly uncomfortable. Maybe we're going to fall on our face, but there's this is giving birth to, and if it really is giving birth to a new stage of humanity, that means none of us know how to do it yet, and we just have inklings that we have to keep following into the unknown.
Well, I find out what I find out when I do that is it simply eliminates dinner invitations.
And we might have to take that risk.
Right.
But right, Neil, right.
One of the things that I'm, the question that I'm hearing is, well, what do I do? And one of the things that I'm feeling is maybe it's not about doing anything, but allowing it to be done through us. In other words, me on my own, I can do nothing, but there is a place of surrender within us where we just allow something else to happen. And I like to call it being an instrument of peace. That beautiful prayer of St. Francis, make me an instrument of your peace. And the thing about an instrument is that it doesn't play itself. It's only when an instrument surrenders into the arms of the master musician that it can be really played and the strings begin to vibrate. And when strings begin to vibrate, then it sets into motion the strings of our own hearts, and that becomes contagious. But it comes from that surrendering into something deeper. Not me saying, well, what can I do? What can I do? But if I surrender deep enough, what will be done through me? How can I be an instrument of peace? And we're in an interesting week because just a few days ago, Mother Teresa became Saint Teresa, and she was the perfect living example of this. She was only seeking to listen and to respond and to see the face of holiness in front of her, no matter what the disguise was, and to respond to it accordingly. So it was very simple. Mother Teresa didn't do anything big. She just did a lot of simple, important things where she surrendered, she became an instrument of peace and changed the world. And maybe that's the key for all of us is to stop saying, what do I have to do, but just to ask for guidance and allow it to be done through us.
This is Steve here, and when I did the prayer, make me an instrument, they made me a bagpipe. So part of me, right? Somebody's got to be the bagpipe, right?
Careful what you ask
for.
for.
in those kind of situations where you're finding yourself in a conversation that requires being disrupted for the value of the underlying hearts of everybody there, that sometimes the surprise of humor, the surprise of disruption that actually creates a sense of surprise and delight that changes the direction of the conversation, then what you find when you disrupt with that, then everybody goes, oh, thank God somebody disrupted that boring conversation. I didn't know how to get out of it. And then something else gets called forth. So I think sometimes having the intention of having that conversation and waiting for an opening, and I know how it is because every one of us, we have five, I'm including you, Steve Farrell, 5 people that love to speak. And so it's really the biggest challenge for me is to not speak and to listen. And I find that when I do that, then my speaking becomes more valuable. I was doing a program for Unitarian youth in Oklahoma. I'm going, what do I do? And it was about evolution and how do I talk to these people? I mean, they're going to think that I'm this older jerk who's imposing my ideas on them. So what I decided to do was say, you know what? We're talking about evolution in the future. You guys, or you folks, are really going to be in the future a long distance past when I'm in the future. What are your concerns? What are your hopes? What are your dreams? What are your fears? And so I listened to them for 45 minutes. Well, you can imagine that anything I said after that 45 minutes was grounded in the fuel that they provided for the conversation. It wasn't an imposition. It was simply a reflection, an answering of their requests through the questions and the ideas that they aired. So sometimes in a conversation like that, you're looking for an opening to either be playfully disruptive, and then if it doesn't work, say, hey, it was channeled, not my fault. You can be playfully disruptive and or listen with a greater curiosity for what's between the lines, what wants to be said, than anyone else is listening for. And often it's the great relief that everybody has that they've been liberated from boredom and they're on track to being up to something.
Yeah, beautiful. Wow. Well, what I didn't want to step in here during this exchange because this really went in a beautiful direction of just how we can be the change and how we can surrender and be an instrument, even if it's a bagpipe, huh, Steve? And then listening in. But you also brought in youth, so let's. And I wanted to go there because that's a big part of spiritual activism, and that's a big demographic during Global Oneness Day this year. What is your message to youth leaders? What are steps they can take to become spiritual activists? And, of course, all the things we're talking about are relevant. But is there any other message that we might want to frame here for youth spiritual activists?
Well, if I remember what it was like to be a youth a little bit, and so if I were to try to speak back to a much younger version of myself, I'm 52 now, or sorry, about to be 52 now, still 51. I think the biggest thing I would want to say to an aspiring younger version of myself who wanted to make a difference in the world is nobody has this figured out yet. And that's always been true, but it's even more true now because the world's changing so fast that, even sort of inherited wisdom is less and less relevant as each year goes by because we're in an ever different world. And so if you can let in that nobody has this figured out, the adults, the elders don't have it figured out, and when I say have it figured out, I mean nobody knows what the world needs. So that means you can literally lean in, trust yourself, go with your own instincts, be very interested in emergent collective wisdom, because again, individuals don't really ever figure it out. It's usually the emergence of our collective consciousness, collective wisdom that starts to show the way. So just trust yourself to find the way forward, because it's going to be an ever new, ever revealing itself as you go process. And something like that.
Yeah, boy, beautiful authenticity, which is something that is discussed a lot these days, and it's relevant to all of us. But I think especially millennials and youth. So beautiful. Yeah,
Steve,
thank
something.
You, James,
this is
please.
James, and there was in listening to what Craig was saying. I was reminded of a quote from Scripture that says, "You can't put new wine into old. No, you can't put old wine. No, you can't put new wine into old wineskins." And maybe the reverse is true as well. You can't put old wine into new wineskins. In other words, we can't impose what we think needs to happen to the youth, and that's why I love what Steve was saying about listening. I'm probably like most of you, always wondering, well, what what is it we can do to energize and to vitalize the younger generation? And as Craig said, I don't know. And it's not about me trying to put my ideas from what maybe worked for me into this younger generation. It's more about listening and then supporting and participating in what is working for them. Maybe it's not going to church. We look at so many of the New Thought churches that maybe served really well at one time, but there aren't a lot of young people. Well, lately I've been going to a great yoga class here in Portland, and that's where all the young people are, or they're going to concerts. And so we just need to listen and find out what it is where's the passion, because spiritual activism always is lit by the fire of passion. And where there is passion, well, passion can go many different ways, but if it's guided by spirit, if we surrender into it, then that passion can lead to a revitalization of who we really are and what can best serve this planet. Not because I know what to do, because I don't, but by listening, by surrendering, by just asking for guidance. It's shown to me. So that's what I think really needs to happen with this younger generation, is not for me to try and tell them what to do, but to just listen to what they want and to support that.
Yeah, beautiful.
You know, it's interesting that in this election campaign, the youngest people found their passion for the oldest candidate, because he was speaking toward actually getting out of the matrix of the usual way of thinking and being. And I'm reading all of these responses to posts and all of that, and what I'm seeing is that this generation right now, the people who are the quote-unquote millennials, etc., they are so very not interested in the lesser evil. They're not going to backtrack to go, well, we didn't make it there, so we're going to, regroup and, they're not doing that. They're actually holding out for something that they find really, really valuable, and they find that the backtracking, back into, well, things take a while to change now, and it's not that there's not some truth to that. It's that they're staying with what their passion really is, and they're not rationalizing going backwards. So I think that in my listening to where young people are right now, it's been very educational.
Interesting.
Yeah, awesome. Thank you, Steve. Yeah, lots of great wisdom here. Neil, do you want to come in on this one?
Well, it's hard for me to top what the three gentlemen just said, but if I were to add anything, what I would say to youth when on the occasion when I'm in front of a younger audience is never hold the thought that there's little you can do. Most of the people who've changed the life around us, whether it's 1,000 years ago or 10 years ago, most of the people not all, but most of the people who've changed life around us had no idea when they were 18, 20, or 25, and certainly not when they were 16 or 17, that they were going to do that or that they even could do that. I guess there may be one or two might have had a premonition about it, but the largest number of people who have really impacted the world in a huge, huge way, if they think back to when they were 18, 19, 20, 25, and even 30, they might not have assumed that there was anything they really could do. So, at least at that level. So what I would say to young people is, don't prejudge the possibilities that lie before you, and don't cut yourself short in terms of the abilities you have to really not only evolve the self, which is of course the main objective here, but not just to evolve the self, yourself, to higher levels than you ever might have imagined, but to in fact touch the world in ways that it did maybe not occurred to you when you were 17 or 19 or 22, but let yourself be wide open to the possibility that you too could be one of those who could make a contribution at such a level that hundreds of thousands of lives would be touched. Not that you have to use it as a goal or feel a failure if you don't do it, but hold the door open rather than falling into what I sometimes see as the cynicism of youth. I know exactly what Steve is talking about, and the young people sometimes get even angry about the fact that since their favorite candidate, the oldest one in the world in this race, didn't make it, that they become angry and they use that anger in ways that are not necessarily in every case productive. We want to make sure we don't turn into social trolls, the social version of internet trolls, who have nothing to say. See, they're already coming to get me. See, I talk this way, they're already coming to get me. We want to make sure that we're not social trolls, and that we don't turn our anger against the very people that we hope to impact in a positive way. So to hold ourselves in the space of that which is going to make possibilities happen, rather than that which, see, another example, you can't do it, just can't be done. If someone had said to, I'm sure James or any one of the four of us, somebody had said to me when I was 22 that, when you're 70, this is what's going to be happening in your life, I would have laughed. But not anymore. So I would say to young people, don't laugh at the greatest possibilities, but hold it as exactly what it is, the greatest possibility.
Very nice.
Great invitation there, Neil. Yeah, Thank you. And that's a Conversations with God message. Can I ask you, Neil, about Book 10, because you mentioned recently that we all thought Conversations with God had ended with Book 9, but there's a Book 10 coming, and I'm guessing there's some inspirations you could share here now during Global Oneness Day that would be quite valuable.
Well, yes. I didn't think there would be another dialogue book. I didn't never imagine. I really thought 10 years ago that was over. And but I was uplifted and inspired a couple of months back to go ahead and surrender to what I was feeling, which is that something wanted to come through in that old form, in that form of a dialogue, rather than the straight first-person narrative voice books that I've created in the past 10 years. And so I allowed myself just to ignore the fact that people are going to laugh, or people are going to say, "Oh, here he goes again," or whatever. I just said, you know what, this is what's occurring, and I allowed it to happen. Out came a book called Awaken the Species, A Final Conversation with God. And the book is making the very points that we're making here, all of us. It's making all of those points. It makes the largest point it makes is that this is the perfect, some people call this now or never time. What I got out of the book was, this is not now or never time, this is the perfect time for our advancement, because we are looking now at conditions and circumstances that are no longer possible to ignore for two reasons. Because of the... Am I interrupting somebody's concert?
We can mute if we're not speaking. Sorry about that. Not sure where that came from, Neil.
That's okay. So I was just going to say, for two reasons, this is the perfect time for our advancement as a civilization and as individuals. The one reason is that the conditions around the world and the circumstances and the events of daily life have become so clearly and painfully, obviously dysfunctional that we can no longer ignore them, and we are getting to the point where necessity is becoming the mother of invention. The second reason is because the Internet and our ability to communicate with each other instantly and know everything all at once around the world makes it even more impossible. Not only makes it more impossible to ignore those circumstances, and makes it possible in a way that we couldn't have done before to shift and impact and change those circumstances. So this confluence of events, the events of the world and the creation of an ability to know all about them and to impact and talk about them and to affect them positively on an instantaneous basis, those two events coming together at the same point in time makes this a pinnacle moment, I believe, in human history. That's the point made by the book Awaken the Species, which will be out here in just a matter of weeks.
Wow.
Congratulations.
I look forward to reading that. Yeah, thank you, Neil. Let me go to each of you. James, you, of course, continue to organize people as peace activists, and recently in such areas as Syria. Can you just share a little bit about your Peace Troubadour activity and how it's touching people, making, really creating spiritual activism around the world?
Well, first of all, we were talking about passion before. I think that's been a topic in this conversation that's come up again and again, how important it is for us to follow our passion. And one of the things that I am most passionate about is helping people to realize the power that they have within them in what we sometimes call prayer, but that's a word that I think limits it a little bit because we have all these old ideas of prayer. I would say more about just being open. You know, Neil talks about that dialogue, and we all have that same open dialogue within us if we can just be aware of it. We're each having a conversation with God every moment. And so to feel that, to be aware of that, that's what prayer is for me. And there's power in that, especially when massive groups of people come together to do the same thing. And I've seen it happen over and over again where we've had these worldwide prayer vigils, and the results often are astounding. In almost every situation, within days after the meditation would happen, something would shift on the ground. There would be a peace talk would be initiated, a ceasefire agreement would be signed. And so the thing I'm most passionate about is helping people realize that you do have an individual power within that passion that comes through that open conversation. But when we come together and do that as one, you know, this is about Global Oneness Day. So when we come together as one and share in that openness, I believe it's the most powerful force in the world, in existence. And so for me, being able to travel to countries that are experiencing that type of conflict, you know, it's not about me. I do find that when people know that there is someone there that they know, it inspires them a little bit more to be involved. So that's the reason I do it. But the thing I'm most passionate about is knowing that there are thousands or even millions of people, in some cases, who are coming together. And some of the things I do I know are a little bit crazy, like the whole Syria thing, but that's what gets attention. And if that creates a spark that gets people involved, then I think that's a beautiful thing. So once again, it comes down to passion. I love singing, as Neil said. And the reason I love doing that is because, and I think this is a very important thing for all of us as well, when I pick up a guitar and sing a peace prayer or whatever it is, something happens because it's not really me. It is me, but it is that larger, more expansive self that is coming through, and so it touches people much deeper than if I'm just talking or sharing like this. You know, sharing like this is a great thing, but what I want to do is to move people in their heart, and nothing does that I can do, you know, more than music. So for me to be able to share the peace prayers, to go to countries and you know that are experiencing conflict, and inspire people to come together and to pray or to meditate, you know, this is a beautiful thing. I can't think of anything that I would rather be doing in this life than bringing people together in prayer and meditation and singing songs of peace. So I hope that I'm doing that when I get as old as Neil.
We're just kidding.
May it
here.
be so.
Beautiful. And a number of times here, James, you've brought back around this whole aspect of allowing something greater than me to express through me, and I just want to call that out. I love that. And of course, when we talk about Global Oneness Day, we're talking about this message that's prevalent throughout conversations with God and so many other material. It says there is only one presence, the divine presence. We're all faces of that, yes. Expressions of that. And what your work is about is just talking about how we can connect with that from our heart place, be an expression yes. of that, sing through that, etc. And it's so powerful. So thank you for that.
Thank you, Steve.
Craig, let me just come over to you. We're winding down. I shared this hour was going to go fast. We only have 16 minutes, and I'm going to take the last two to just tell everybody about the next program. So let's come back to today's world and where we are. And as we look at today's world and we consider all the things that we've talked about here, are you optimistic? Can we Can we change some of the conditions of the planet? And Craig, also, if you can share a web address or a way people can follow you and your work, that'd be great.
I'll try to find some way to weave all that together. Am I optimistic? You know, I think a spiritual activist cannot afford to be anything other than profoundly optimistic and profoundly realistic at the same time. I'm not going to go as far as pessimism, although I do want to say, just as a footnote, there are interesting studies that show that pessimists tend to be much more successful than optimists. So that's worth noting, and of course the answer is because they're more present to the dangers and the potential things that could get in their way, so they're taking care of those, whereas optimists can be Pollyannish and not paying attention to those and can get tripped up. That's the analysis. But I'm not going to advocate pessimism because it doesn't have any energy in it. And I think we need to be tapped into an extraordinary energy that comes from the sense of possibility that we've all been speaking about here. I loved that Neil came back to that sense of possibility when he was talking about what he would say to the youth, and I think it applies really to all of us. I mean, in many ways, it could be one of the core, if we were to try to distill this call, we could probably distill it into a set of principles of spiritual activism or something, because so many powerful principles have been brought forth. But this sense of extraordinary possibility, of openness to possibility, would certainly be one of the most potent spiritual principles of being a change agent, of being an activist. And I want to just, the one other thing I want to say about it is that I think it's not just about, well, you know, I'm going to choose to be optimistic because being anything other than that wouldn't have any energy. It's that I actually think when we start to get in touch with the nature of the evolutionary process, and we look at life through what's been called a deep time perspective. You know, we look at the long game of evolution in this cosmos and on this planet, and evolution as it's been playing out in the human race, cultural and social and consciousness evolution that's been going on now since human beings arrived on the scene. You know, the one thing you start to see is that things never stay the same. You know, and anytime we're in a moment, like a moment right now, oh, look at all the challenges we're facing, you know, people, right, you know, politically or, you know, environmentally or, you know, from a global terror point, you know, we look at these seemingly intractable, right? A lot of the issues that we're dealing with now seem kind of intractable. How are we ever going to get the corporate interests out of politics? How are we ever going to deal with our carbon footprint? You know, these things, they seem, how could we do it? But the one thing you can know for sure, if you look at a deep time perspective, is that it's not going to stay this way. It never does. How every time it seemed intractable, eventually, you know, life found a way forward to meet the challenge and adapt and evolve. And I guarantee every one of the challenges that we're dealing with, it's going to change. Now, how it's going to change, how quickly it's going to change, that's something we can play a big role in. We can, and that's where we need to feel empowered, as has also been coming at it, empowered to be the change, to be a change agent, to help steer and drive that. But let's live in the truth that we're in that if the universe is anything, it's an evolutionary process, and that's something that we now know we can contribute to in a profound way. So we need to be optimistic, and we have good reason to be.
Oh, man, one thing we can know for sure is that things are not going to continue to stay this way. And that I think that was one of the points Neil shared that was coming through in this newest Conversations with God book. So, amen and amen. And there is incredible wisdom one could distill from this call. I'm guessing listeners are going to want to listen to the replay. Replays are available free for 48 hours, just so people know. So you can come back and listen to this panel again if you want. Let's stay with this question.
Oh, I failed to give my website address. I was going to try. Go to integralenlightenment.com if you want to learn more about me and my stuff. integralenlightenment.com. There we go.
That's Craig Hamilton. Great. Well, let's just stay with this question. Steve, if we could go to you next. Can we change some of the conditions of the planet? What do you see as you stand here right now?
Well, I think context is really, really important, and I like the deep time context. That really puts things in perspective, that wherever we are now, the needle is going to be moved. The tour that I've been on, the performance tour that I've been on, I'm calling it the Going Sane Tour, because as we're looking at, what is normal, it's actually insane. Sanity is not the same as normal. Sanity comes from the same root as the word sanitary, sanitarium. Comes from sanus. So when we're thinking of sane, we're also thinking of something that has a vibration of wholeness and coherence and health. And I've met a number of people who had a radical awakening, and they're seeing the world from this different awakened perspective, and they're looking around them and they're going, whoa, whoa, whoa. There's the people around them. And I go, oh, you got struck by enlightening and you went sane. And so what I'm hoping to promote through this, through playfulness and so on, is the idea that these what Bruce Lipton and I call the imaginal cells in spontaneous evolution, the awakening cells of the new butterfly organism, have been finding one another. And just like, to use another analogy, the mycelium, the mushrooms that grow underground, and they have a huge underground network, and none of this reveals itself until the mushrooms pop out. And so we're not sure exactly when and where the mushrooms are going to pop out, but we recognize that what's been happening over this last 10, 15, 20, perhaps 40 years is that these cells have been coalescing and cohering. So even if we don't have the evidence out there, we have the evidence in here, and the more people that we meet who can find that vibration of sanity in these what seem like intractable problems. I was just asked to be on the staff and board of an organization called Tree of Life, and their mission, when they first contacted me, they said, well, this is about the climate emergency. I said, oh, you mean the emergency? So in reframing, emergency gets us motivated, it gets us adrenalized. However, once we're in that adrenalized state, it's not sustainable. It's like Craig said, there's no energy in that. So what's sustainable is a steady vision of keeping your eye on the prize. And this idea of people coming together, not so much to fight what they don't want, but to continue to keep their eye on what they do want. And that's something that cultivates kind of an educated, grounded optimism, because we know the direction that we're moving in. We know where we're headed. The great movement of the 20th century, the civil rights movement, which involved a lot of singing and praying, James, that movement, they knew where they were going. As Van Jones said, Martin Luther King didn't say, I have a complaint. He said, I have a dream. So it's really important to focus on, to keep your eye on the prize. And the more we can articulate the prize and all of the different iterations and variations and reflections of that prize, we make it vivid and we create a compelling future to go through what people find to be a challenging present.
Beautiful. Thank you, Steve. Awesome. And James, let me come around to you here. We've got about 3 minutes each here during this panel. So can we change some of the conditions of the planet?
I totally agree with everyone here, everything that's been shared. And as with everything else, there are higher and higher frequencies, just kind of like going in an airplane. Sometimes, what you see from one perspective is different than what you see from another perspective. And so what I would say is that, and I think what it really encourages me is to know that in the truest, highest sense, this has already been done. It's already happened. And that gives me a confidence of knowing that I don't know how it happened, but that the ending is sure. Like it says in A Course in Miracles, this is a required course. Only the time that you take it is optional. It's already happened. And so for me to know that one way or another, love and peace is prevailing right now. It already did happen, and I can participate in this in a wide variety of ways, but just having that confidence, it puts me at ease. It keeps me from becoming pessimistic or worrying that, we're going to get this wrong. Ultimately, the truth within us finds a way. And that's, I think, a very positive message, that ultimately this is going to come around. So if each one of us plays the role that we have to play in small ways, if we're authentic, if we're being real with one another, then I am fully confident that in one way or another the ending is guaranteed, and we will come out the other side of this in light.
Beautiful. Really beautiful. James, what website can people go to follow your work?
People can go to worldpeacepulse.com.
Worldpeacepulse.com. And
yes,
this message is shared, that the ending is assured. That, of course, is a prominent message in Conversations with God also. It says that I'll pull you back together, all of you who are no longer living on the planet, to see what has happened, this awakening, this shift. And job well done to everybody that's involved. And I'll tell you, that's what has allowed me to persevere for 13 years, because even looking out, seeing the media today with the messages that are out there, we, on one level, we need to know that the end is assured. Neil, you've got the last 2 minutes here. If you could come in with your message about where we are and the one thing you'd like to share with this listening audience as we close, and then a website where people can follow your work.
Well, I can't do anything better than what James just said. He's the mystic for sure, and he just delivered a highly mystical message, which is that it's already been accomplished. He's really looking deeply into the space-time continuum, and he understands the physics of it. This is not just metaphysics. This is not just pie-in-the-sky speculation. This is the physics of it. Physicists will tell you that if you travel far enough, fast enough away from the Earth, and you look back on the Earth, that you'll look at Earth's past. Physicists will also tell you that if you travel from that point in distant space and come racing toward the Earth and look upon the Earth at what we call now, you will actually see the future. Highly evolved beings in the universe can see the future now. That is God and all the highly evolved beings operating at that level. And if they thought we had no future, believe me, they'd be telling us we'd get the information. But the information we're getting is precisely the opposite. So James has landed on the seminal truth of this whole conversation, being a spiritual activist. It's not pointless. It's merely a part of the process that's already taken place, but that doesn't mean we should become complacent about it. It encourages us, in fact, to know that what we are doing will, in fact, produce that outcome that has already occurred. And what a great, great gift to give to the planet, to know that we were one of those who caused it to happen.
Amen. And Neil, where can people go to follow you and your work?
CWG.
One place.
CWGconnect.com. You want to stay connected with the material of Conversations with God? CWGconnect.com.
All right, and that is the last word. Thank you, Neil, Craig, James, and Steve. Wow, just so much inspiration, wisdom, heart energy, just really an awesome hour. So thank you so much. I also want to thank the 2016 Global Oneness Day co-creators and my partners and colleagues in Humanities team who've been working tirelessly for a year to put together this program. Finally, thank you to the enormous audience who have registered for Global Oneness Day and who are participating live during this summit. This is our 7th year celebrating Global Oneness Day, and we've grown our number of registrations and listeners each year. Over 200,000 have registered to participate during this time frame. Thank you to each of you for helping to make Global Oneness Day our Earth Day for an awakened humanity. And next up is our closing panel. It's hard to believe, but we're coming up on the end of the day. During the closing ceremony, we're going to be gathering to share from humanities team leaders some of the favorite things that were shared here during this 12-plus hour day. So it's going to be really inspiring. Don't miss it. Be sure to join us. Before we go to the closing panel, we're going to enjoy a oneness moment and experience 10 seconds of silence so we may connect with the divine within and each other. Go ahead and begin our oneness moment now.